Tommy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for making time for this. I know you've had a busy couple weeks.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, man. I've been stoked to do this one for a while, so I'll gladly make time for stuff like this, stuff that I'm invested in. So yeah, no problem.
I appreciate it. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, so I'm glad we did. So like I said earlier when we were chatting, for anybody who's listening, I don't really know anything about pro wrestling, other than the very basics. I was a Hulk Hogan fan, like every other, kid of the 80s, and I sort of loosely follow it, I suppose, a little bit here and there, but I don't know a ton about it other than, like we talked about, it seems like there is a ton of crossover between the two cultures, between the way the businesses work. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, and about your brand Blxckmass. So I guess for anybody who's not familiar, obviously you are a pro wrestler. You were with WWE for a long time. You've parted ways, but what is your kind of history with music? I mean, you have like an Integrity collab, so you're obviously not a tourist.
Yeah. I think for so many of us, I think for so many of our generation, even our current generation, I think for people like ourselves, I think creative people will always find creative people or creative ways to, have an outlet or an expression. I think music kind of either allows you to create or it accommodates your creative vision. I can't remember a time in my life where I wasn't doing something or have had like great ideas if I wasn't listening to music. You know what I mean? All my best ideas come with music, and that's like, it's an escape to so many people. I think that everyone in the world uses music to accommodate emotions, to accommodate creativity, to accommodate projecting brainwaves onto what it is that you want to make. Like you have a very successful podcast, a very successful YouTube show that's based around music, right?
Moderately successful.
And the same, highly successful, and the same goes for me. Like a lot of the times when I was a kid, and I think again for so many of us, music was an escape. Music was a thing that I could dive into. Music was something that it didn't harm me. You know what I mean? It wasn't something that would put me in jeopardy. It wasn't something. Music allowed me to be me, no matter what. No matter how much I didn't feel like myself as a kid, music allowed me to be me, no matter what, because I would put in my earphones and no one perceived that world but me through the music.
So were you like a metal guy, hardcore guy, a little bit of both?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think I was 12 when I bought Fear Factor's Demanufacture. That was the first album I ever bought, and then the second and third album were Uncivilization from Biohazard and Damned in Black by Immortal. So I had these three very different yet alternative genres in my collection, in my own collection. And before that, my brother used to be friends with, I have an older brother, and he used to be friends with a guy that lived in our streets, same age as my brother. My brother's 40 now. And he was a big Iron Maiden fan. So, whenever this guy would come around, he was wearing Iron Maiden shirts. And obviously when you're like 6-7 years old, that looks impressive as hell on a t-shirt, right? You see Eddie on the shirt, and you remember seeing the album cover art for Killers, and the woman laying stabbed and Eddie with the knife standing there. And that always kind of intrigued me. And then my brother had a mixtape, so I started listening to the mixtape, right? You had all these like Iron Maiden songs. And I remember the first one that I ever heard was "Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter" and "Running Free," and that's kind of how it started. My father was always very much into guitar music, not like heavy alternative stuff or anything, but like Dire Straits and Neil Young and stuff like that, Bob Dylan, Fleetwood Mac. So there was always guitar music around me, and then I kind of grew into the guitar music. And sure, I'm European, I'm from the Netherlands. There's a lot of dance music that came out of the Netherlands too. So I'm also not particularly, I don't dislike dance music neither. And when you listen to Fear Factor's Demanufacture, where they're using synths and stuff like that, they're using samples, and they kind of really laid a foundation for a little bit more of what's the word I'm looking for, industrial metal, stuff like that. So, I grew up with so many different styles of music, but they were all towards the alternative stuff. And that's kind of just how it grew, man. Like I love any type of music, especially as a kid, as long as it's alternative, like you're into it. You're going to gravitate towards it. Doesn't matter whether it's hardcore or black metal or regular metal or like whatever it is, you're going to gravitate to it because it speaks to you.
Was there the kind of crossover with wrestling back then that there is now? It feels like that's, I don't know, not new, but I don't feel like that was there in even the 90s. Is that a newer thing, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you even go back, like WrestleMania is the first one. Like Alice Cooper was involved in some of the earlier stuff, and they did crossovers with pop culture, and that's kind of how wrestling also was brought into pop culture. And like, it's funny, right? Because we started the conversation. You were saying I grew up as like a Hulk Hogan guy, and like I don't actively follow it, but everybody I always talk to has some story about professional wrestling as a kid, or seeing something, or knowing someone that was involved somehow with some promotion or with the WWE or with other companies. You know what I mean? And it's just I think everybody knows it all around the world. Like the IP of it is huge. The pro wrestling sports entertainment part. It's big. Everybody knows about it.
And you were part of, at least initially, NXT, which it seems like that's sort of their more like edgy kind of brand. Is that right?
Yeah, I think they kind of like bridge the gap between, when you're on the independents, I feel the alternative scene is much bigger on the independents. It's a little bit more comparable to like, hardcore shows and stuff like that. It's a very true crowd. They're very dedicated fans. Like the independents have, the kids there that are competing on the independents and the fan base are very, very diehard, very, very vocal, very positively opinionated and negatively opinionated. I feel like there's a lot of similarities between. Well, isn't that the same with music?
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's a genre of music apart from maybe black metal. But with hardcore, people are very opinionated as to, staying true to what they think is true. And it's the same that goes with professional wrestling. So in that sense, it has a cult following wherever it goes. And NXT kind of like, obviously it's a big stage. NXT is huge, and, it gravitates to that. And now like with companies like AEW that, in my opinion, even grab that core passionate fan base, even more so. You see all these like cool little pop culture blends, but also these underground like blends that kind of mesh in well. Like I think last night they had Poppy on, and they've done stuff with Parkway Drive. They've had so many
like Code Orange did something with like NXT.
Yeah. Code Orange played me out to the ring.
That's right.
They played my track with Brandon from Incendiary.
That's
so that
right.
was obviously cool. So there's definitely
with stuff like that. Did you put that together with them, or how does something like that happen?
The entrance thing.
Yeah.
That's all Triple H. Hunter did, like, I think that same year.
So he's that plugged in.
Yes, yeah, he's a big Motorhead guy. He's always like him and me. A lot of conversations were about music. I would like if there was a new album out, I would like screen cap it and send it to him. And he likes listening to music, and big Metallica guy, big Motorhead guy. Like I think Motorhead is his favorite band. If you type in Triple H Motorhead, you'll see all sorts of pictures of him and Lemmy together. And
but there's a big difference. There's a big gap between Motorhead and Code Orange, though. So it's pretty cool and impressive that he's that plugged into a relatively new small band, that he would understand what they bring to the product. Keeps his ear on the ground, and. And that's why I think NXT was always so fun, because it kept that the more true crowd engaged, and it allowed fans to really like see something that they've always loved on a grander scale without feeling that it compromised them. Yeah, it seems also like there's a lot of like promoting yourself and managing your career as a wrestler seems almost the same thing as being a musician to me. Would you say that's true?
No, it's completely correct. You are your own franchise. You are your own, again, the word IP, I use that word all the time. But you are responsible for that. And, the gigs you play is, your promotion. And obviously now with social media, it's a hell of a lot easier, which is a good thing. But back in the day, it was word to mouth, and other promoters seeing you wrestle in other companies, and you would inch closer to this side of town, and then you would inch closer to the border of this thing, and because right. There were companies running all over, and there was a lot of tape trading going around. But you are 100% correct. You're in a car with a group of dudes that are going to perform that night in Germany, in front of 500-600 dedicated people. You know what I mean?
And probably a similar challenge, I would imagine. These days, it seems like everybody wants to do wrestling. Like every bigger dude I know that's into, Every Time I Die and Black Dahlia Murder is, going to pro wrestling school. And standing out from the crowd seems to be the challenge in both of those.
Yes, I feel that in the course of my over 2 decades of being involved in this business, being involved in this sport, a lot has changed, some good, some bad. And one of the things that I feel that I wish that a lot of the younger kids would do is indeed find ways to stand out, look at what other people are doing and making a conscious decision of okay, that's what they're doing. I'm not doing that. And I'm going to, because that's what I've always tried doing, and I feel that did make me stand out for a very long time. But eventually, things catch up, and, it's always, there's different levels to this stuff. And I feel like also there's a lot of accessibility, there's a lot of access to people being able to get trained, which in my days wasn't, because they didn't want to train you, because that was 150 pounds, and they were like, we don't want to train this lanky skinny kid from the Netherlands that wants to be a pro wrestler. It was a big man business, right?
Yeah.
Back in 2000. So it's a lot more easier to get in, but it also is at the cost of the quality of training and the quality that I personally feel that wrestling needs to, be brought in with. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of phenomenal talent. There is kids that are doing crazy things that things I even think were possible, but I feel sometimes in that the details kind of get lost a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But, that doesn't mean that there's people like myself and other people in that industry that can take and put an arm around them and say, hey, look, what you're doing is great. Now let me polish you. You know what I mean? Because that's what it's about.
I saw that you trained a bit with Bob Schreiber, and that era of Dutch MMA and kickboxing was no fucking joke.
Nope.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've always, as a kid, I've always wanted to be a professional wrestler my entire life. I think the first thing I ever saw was a little clip of the $1 Million Man. And I was hooked, and my dad was just flipping through channels. But we never really had WWE or WWF on in the Netherlands. We had New Japan. So right as I saw that clip was probably the last episode they aired in the Netherlands. And then we got New Japan Pro Wrestling, so the more Japanese, realistic shoot style, martial arts orientated style that would be presented. And as a 6-7-year-old, you're looking at that and you're like, wow, that's I gotta do that. Okay, so I gotta do martial arts. So my parents would put me on judo, and they would put me on karate, and later on I went to Penchak Silat and kickboxing. And at that time, I'm 9-10 years old when this starts happening, where I transitioned to Penchak Silat and kickboxing and stuff. You obviously understand that pro wrestling is a complete separate entity, to that.
But a lot of those guys, pro wrestlers back then, could fight.
Still do. A lot of them still do.
Yeah, they were legit.
They were bad dudes, but it's also because the training back then was different. You were taught how to apply shoot holds and actually wrestle and stuff like that and grapple. And a lot of them would come back from catch wrestling and had backgrounds in pancrase and shoot style fighting and stuff. And the same was when I started training there, because obviously back then you had guys like Hans Nijman and Dick Vrij, Bob Schreiber, Melvin Manhoef,
Mm-hmm.
all these Yuri Mess, all these dudes that were all like legitimate fighters, and came from the era of like, open hands striking and stuff like that.
Right.
And you had different rule systems, and pride was just kind of going around, and it was a different, more unregulated era in MMA. Yeah, and it was brutal.
Yeah.
Really, really, really brutal. Yeah.
Do
absolutely.
people do pro wrestlers still train like that, or is it less about kind of that shoot style now, or what are things like now?
I think a lot of them are very more based on the athleticism part. I don't. I still, if I'm actually setting up a school with my wife, and it is absolutely in my in my intent to teach Muay Thai, kickboxing, at least striking and stuff like that in my school. Like, I have no grappling background, so I can't teach grappling, but I would hire a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach or a grappling coach once a month, and hey guys, we're gonna, because I want them to feel the legitimacy of the holds that they apply to, and for me, that part is still very, very important. Like, I'm a big fan of like protecting that part of the wrestling business where people do know how to punch and kick and trap and apply chokes and pressure and heel hooks and knee bars and stuff like that. And because it also gives you a dimension and form of realism applied to your trade.
Sure. And for anybody who's listening that may not be familiar, like the era of Dutch kickboxing that we're talking about here, that people like Bob Schreiber came from, I would say was like some of the best striking ever. I mean, that like K1 late 90s, early 2000s era of kickboxing was fucking incredible.
Yep. Yeah. It's, it set the foundation for what is now, a very global phenomena in terms of like MMA, with, we're talking about One Championship, UFC, companies like that. And they laid the foundation for all of that. And sure, even back then the UFC was around, but it's like, and everything kind of like evolved into this, what it is now. And a lot of those like Dutch kickboxers and like free fighters, as we called them back in the day, actually, are responsible for a lot of the kids that you see now in those octagons, in those rings.
Mm-hmm. So how do you get noticed as a kid in the Netherlands? How do you get noticed all the way over here in America and kind of make that crossover? Because I hear from a lot of musicians that have that challenge, and it's really hard.
Yeah. I think it's a mindset. I can only speak from my perspective. And like I said, when I started out, social media wasn't really a thing. You'd have like a few pages. Like, the internet was very, very new. Obviously, in the span of 25 years that the internet's been around to this extent, a lot of things have changed and evolved very quickly, of course. But when I started out, there was not a lot of wrestling. A lot of the old timers didn't want to train you because of aforementioned reasons. I just never gave up, man. I literally never gave up, because wrestling is also the thing that kept my head above water. Same with music, right? It allowed me to project my own world, my own reality, and I could trap myself, and it gave me purpose. And because it gave me purpose, I allowed myself to do things that I normally wouldn't have done it, because I was so in love with wrestling. And like I said, there's been times where I absolutely hated professional wrestling, and I have a theory on this. You need to hate it. You need to hate what you do passionately, at least once or twice in your life. So then when you stick through it, you start understanding why you love it in the first place.
Tell me about that, because I've felt that a few times.
Yeah.
And when I've felt that, mostly I quit, and I don't know if that was the right move or not.
Well, if you have to ask yourself if it was the right move, then it probably was not the right move. Because that means that somewhere you have some regret in regards to it. I'm a big believer of sticking it out. I'm a big believer of like enduring, because you learn so much from being unable to endure things. I think that's a lesson that a lot of people don't really embrace anymore. But enduring struggle And I know this sounds like a hardcore song, I know, but enduring the struggle. Yeah. But you, and obviously, you talked about like your personal struggles as a kid growing up and like, the things that you were involved with, but you've learned so many valuable things through those struggles that it allowed you to create even more. Like, had you not gone through this, let's face it, you and I would have not had this conversation on this level. Probably not even had this conversation. You know what I mean? And that's why there is something to gain from enduring struggle, from enduring sadness, heartache, loss, your surroundings being taken away, like, whatever it is that you're going through, there is something in terms of like passion and hating what you're passionate about, but enduring it, that allows for so much more love eventually for it. But you have to stick it through. You have to get through it. And that's the hard part.
Man, I think that is such an important thing for people to hear, because like sometimes I hate YouTube like on a daily basis. Sometimes I'm like, fuck this. I hate listening to all these fucking people like just throw verbal abuse at me and blah, blah, blah. Some days I hate it, but I never quit because, of basically what you said. I know that the difference between someone who achieves, I don't want to say greatness because I don't think that I'm great, but someone who achieves something is like anything you want to do is going to fucking suck sometimes. And if you just quit like I have in the past, the first time I was like, I'm over this. And then you quit, you're starting at the bottom of the mountain every time. And I realized how much that set me back in the past. And, it may sound to people who are listening to this like you're entitled because, you have a great job doing YouTube or wrestling or whatever, but there's moments where you hate it. How do you kind of think about that? Like, do you feel guilty for hating it?
No, because I eventually realized that there was a lesson involved. There's moments where I was like, why now? Why am I not motivated anymore? Like, why at this moment? Because there's been times where I was super demoralized and unmotivated that some of the biggest opportunities came knocking at my door. And I was like, why now?
Yeah.
But then I see it as like, hey man, if I can do this and I can pull it off while feeling like this, imagine what I can do when I found myself in the struggle again, and I found myself, I've conquered that, and I'm able to like, step to the next plateau, and like, I can level up, as the gym bros call it. You know what I mean? And it's important. And I think that's, like you talk about how did you get from some unknown place in the Netherlands, well, not unknown, but like some unknown kid in Amsterdam to, being on WrestleMania in 16, 17 years later, right? But that's also, it's 16, 17 years. It's that road, it's not going to be given to you. Like, and sure, there's people who are going to get there quicker than you. There are people that are naturally more gifted than you, but you can't think like that. You know what I mean? And you made a good remark about like sometimes you hate it because of all the remarks that I made that made you. Same for me. Sometimes you're just like, because everybody deliberately misconstrues what you're saying so that they can have an agenda that happens continuously. It's happened to me 6-7 times this week because of things that I said. You know what I mean? And like, and they'll purposely create a narrative so that people go, oh, this idiot, oh, he's delusional, oh, he's brainwashed, all these things. And and the funny thing is, for the last 4 or 5 months, have made a conscious effort to not check comments anymore. Yeah. And honestly, I've never been a big let me Google or go on Twitter and look for my own name. I've never been a big fan of that because I can count on maybe one hand the amount of times I've done that, and I can tell you that every single time I did it, I found disappointment. So then I kind of went like, why am I purposely like willing to
like invite this shit into your brain?
Like, it makes no sense. Yeah, it makes no sense. Like, am I really that much of do I really like am I like some sadomasochist that I'm looking for this, Yeah. So no, because it never made me feel better. And it's also like, it's a split second in time. You don't really always specifically know how things are meant or how things are written. And look, there's people who are just like, they just fucking hate you for the fact that you are what you are. That is just going to happen. There are 7 billion people on this planet. I can guarantee you that there's probably several hundred people that just literally do not like you. So fucking what?
For no reason.
Yeah, for no reason. And that's just how it is, because I think especially in this day and age, with social media and like, the way I look at, sometimes I see I see political discussion. Everyone sees political discussions, right? And the amount of people that clearly have no education in politics or have no understanding of politics, and not that I do, I don't at all, but that's also why I don't talk about it.
Yes.
I'm not a political guy, but the arguments that are being made where you think to yourself like, okay, but I think that, like, all this stuff is being taken out of context and like you're feeding your own narrative, and it's almost like you want to be distracted with this, and I wonder what's causing that, and I just don't want to partake in that. You know what I mean? I don't want to partake in this level of being distracted, because I do feel that a part of it is distraction.
Yep.
It's like, are we trying to fill our time? Are we trying to fill? Oh, here comes a cat.
Hey, buddy.
Well,
I feel like also once you get big enough, your profile becomes large enough that there's almost a switch that flips where instead of being, loved, you're just like a target for people to throw shit at.
Well, you can't be too successful.
Yeah, exactly.
You can be successful, but you can't be too successful. And I think people are deliberately going to try and punch holes in your game plan because it makes them feel better about themselves. Like, I feel like a lot of times people criticize, especially now, if I'm just purely looking at my profession, right? And from what I have seen in the past, and it's like they criticize because they're in a place of comfort and they've always wanted to do what you do, but they've just never made that call. So then when they criticize and they see you fall, it's a validation for them to go, see, that's why I never did it. Now I can feel better about myself because I was the smart one, because I didn't do it. I didn't make myself look like an idiot, because in the eyes of people who are unmotivated or are, like working 9 to 5 and are in places that they hate. And again, before it's like, there's nothing wrong with, I've worked 9 to 5 before, like
sure,
as a wrestler, I'm not saying, but there's a lot of people that hate that position, but they don't want to change anything about it. So it's easier for them to criticize others so that they validate being in that position. And I'm convinced that like for a big part that, that's what that is. You cannot tell me that people who are so negative and so, they go through great lengths, to make sure that you know how much they hate you, like to the point where they make anonymous profiles. Like, I can't imagine being this distracted and this like.
So you give that much time in your day to do this?
Exactly. And and the thing is, like, I think that's always the big difference. And yes, and I get that for a lot of people that can be very, very difficult. But my point is, there is a reason why they're doing that. And you cannot tell me that any of these people are truly, genuinely content or happy with every factor in their life. And that's, it's, I think it's, for the most part, it's a part of projection. And I think, I don't really check my Instagram DMs, but there was a while ago that someone, every once in a while I'll click on it and kind of see what the top requests are, because sometimes like brands will reach out to me or like, whatever. And this person messaged me, and there's 2 messages. One message is like full of like,
I know where this is headed.
Like getting to the point of like being really personal, like talking about like, my wife, talking about me, and talking about like, like the way I look and whatever. And then like there was a message underneath it, and where he just basically said like, I'm glad that you never read the above message, and I deliberately didn't unsend it because I want you to read this at one point. Because I did this because I was in a divorce with my wife, and I hated everything. And I hated that, I hated that you were doing what you're doing. So I just found all these reasons to attack you. And even though you might never read this DM, I apologize because it was me. And I feel really bad that I sent you this message. And you know what I mean? And like,
and you feel bad for the guy,
I do, but that's the thing. Someone once told me, right? The definition of hate is to be obsessed with something till the day you die.
Yeah.
I don't want any of that.
Yeah.
I don't want any of that. I don't want that. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to have an unhealthy obsession with something to that extent, like a legit, like a literal unhealthy obsession, because it takes energy, it takes time away from you, and it puts you on a lower, like, I feel like it's like it's some lower level human consciousness that I cannot comprehend. And honestly, I wish for everyone, even if you absolutely hate me, I hope that you find all the things in life that make you happy. I really do. Because I've been at the top of the mountain, I've been at the bottom of the mountain, and I've been at every step in between. And I know how incredibly hard all these things can be. But if you would just look at it from the perspective of having walked all the steps and, you know, standing on top and looking down and realizing that what you're doing is just not contributing to anything. But at the same time, that's also the reason why you can't dwell on it and you can't like sink your teeth in it. Because I've done that in the past.
Yep.
And what did it get me? Anxiety, frustration. I've lost sleep over things. And that, like, in the long run, it didn't matter because a day later, everybody forgot about it.
Yep.
You know? There's no point to any of it. And you also got to realize that for the most part, you know, these people are never going to come up walking up to you and say to your face. They won't.
No, a lot of the same people will be super nice to you to your face. It's weird.
Yeah. And that's also why I feel like you should not dwell too much on it and realize that there is, like, from a mental aspect, there's probably a lot more going on. There's a lot of pain going on.
Yeah.
As like, you know, simplistic as that explanation sound, you know, it's a cliche, but I think at this point, like, you know, cliches have to come from somewhere. There's always some form of truth. There's a reason why they're cliches. And I think a lot of times it has to do with like being in complete denial.
Well,
you know?
Speaking of people skills and getting along with people, you know, to me, I guess I view wrestling as a creative job, even though it's like a you know, it's a physical activity. But to me, it's a creative job. And, you know, when I think about creative jobs, I think there's sort of two parts of it. One is the craft of, like, you know, being able to make your art or do what you do in the ring. And the other part of it is being able to get along with all the people and make relationships and kind of manage that stuff behind the scenes. And I think a lot of creative people don't really think about that part of it as much as they should. You were talking before about talking to Triple H. I watched some other interview where you were talking about how, you know, you didn't love how the writers had been managing your, you know, storyline or whatever, and you were working with them to kind of change that. Can you talk a little bit about that side of the job and what you've learned about kind of how to make relationships and, you know, deal with people?
Well, at the end of the day, especially when you work for a big corporation, it's a team effort, right? Nothing gets done without camera people. Nothing gets done without writers. Nothing gets done without referees. Nothing gets done without anyone. Not same with us. You know what I mean? Everybody plays their role. Everybody plays their part. And it's an unfortunate part of our business that, you know, you like, well, not an unfortunate part. It's part of our business that you have to sometimes say, all right, this is as good as it's going to get in terms of like the creative for today. And, you know, it's a very weird landscape that I was in. And, you know, there's only one person in charge. You know what I mean? Like, creative can jump high and low what they want. There's one person who eventually gets the last say. And if that say is not what we're trying to get out, then you're just going to have to accept it.
And that person is not you.
That person is definitely not me. That person is, you know, the person is the big cheese, the big man in charge.
And this is how it is at every company, by the way. This is not, you know, people may think what they think about Vince McMahon, but it's how it is at every company. When I worked at, you know, Abercrombie and Fitch, it's the same thing. We show the CEO, here's what we want to make this season. And if he says, I don't like that color green, then we change it. And that's the way it is.
Yeah. You can't do anything. Like, you can try and argue it if you feel like you've got a good point, but you also got to pick your battles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, like, how important is this one today? You know, do you want to save that for a moment where, like, it really, really, really matters? But then how do you stack up what really matters versus is it important today? You know, it's a very difficult strategic way of communicating. And even then, you know, even when I argued my point a lot of times, clearly, it made no sense, or like it didn't come through, or the decision was still, no, this is what we're doing. So, you know, it's difficult because, like, on a personal level, and this is also something that I think a lot of people don't understand, because this is also something that I've been seeing floating around. Like, on a personal level, me and Vince always got along fine, but at the end of the day, he's going to make a decision that he feels is best for what I'm doing, for what the WWE is doing, And you know what I mean? And that's what that is. I got along with them fine, but it doesn't mean that I'm impervious from anything else. That doesn't mean that I'm disillusioned that, you know, he wasn't responsible for a lot of those things. It wasn't. But, you know, and that's just the way every company works. Like, I worked in rehab before this in terms of like physical therapy and stuff like that. I would rehabilitate people that had accidents and rehabilitate people's lifestyles and stuff like that, mentally, physically, and all that stuff. Me and my boss, we're like, you know, good buds. But there's been times where I fucked up and he yelled at me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because that's his job.
My boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just how it is. Like, you're never impervious from any of those things. And like, even then, I'm not saying that it was always right. There's tons of stuff that I disagree with. There's tons of stuff with decisions that were made that, like, you know, like the whole, and like, I'm not going to dive into this too deep, but the whole reason why, you know, we're able to have this conversation now. And the reason why I got let go, in my opinion, is like bizarre. You know what I mean? But I can jump high and low and get as pissed off about it as I want. It's not going to serve me. It is what it is.
Yeah.
You know? And like, all right, on to better things. And that's just how I think a lot of times for people who have not worked or have not been in positions like this, or have been in positions like this, but again, coming down to the projection part and coming to, like, you know, finding ways and finding holes in what it is that you're saying or misconstruing it, you know, that's just what kind of, like, you know, that's just what happens. This is how that goes. This is the nature of the beast in any business. And is it fun? No. But what am I supposed to do? Get all bitter, mad, and yell and scream and kick? What is that going to do?
That's not going to help. I feel like choosing your battles is a really important lesson that a lot of creative people, including me when I was younger, really struggle with. Like, I used to get so pissed off every time I thought the boss made the wrong call about a project, and I would argue every little point. And I still think I was right about all those things. But from his perspective, it's exhausting. It's like, I can't work with you because you argue with me about every little fucking thing and we can't get anything done. This is not working. And I think
that's the flip side of things.
Yeah. It's hard to be able to kind of put your ego as the creative aside and go, hey, I think I'm right, but I'm going to let this one go because it's about winning the war, not this one little battle.
Yep.
And I imagine with wrestling, there's a ton of that because, you know, you are the one out there on the front lines, and the average fan, it seems to me that people understand how the business works, but still, you know, if you do something in the ring that people don't like, you're going to take the heat for it, even if it wasn't your idea. So I'd imagine it's got to be especially tough to let that stuff go in your role.
Yes and no. You know, you learn to basically just, like, you know, brush it off. And again, like, I think the good point that you make is, like, you know, picking your battles. You know, that's like I said, like, you know, it's not about, like you said, it's not about winning this, like, particular little war. It's like this little battle. You want to win the war eventually. Like I said, yes and no. Like, yeah, it's been fun, especially in the beginning when it happens a lot, where you're just kind of like going, like, God damn it, you know. I knew this was going to go X, Y, Z, or, like, you see, we should have done this. But eventually you also just kind of let it be. And, like, you know, you have to trust the system at some point, even when you don't trust the system, because it's all you can do.
Yeah. You're part of this machine that is bigger than anybody's control.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the other thing, right? The business is going to be fine no matter what.
Like, it sure is. With or without you.
You know? 100%, you know, there's no illusions in regards to that. Like, but that's also why I've been so positive about the way everything's been going, because other than, like, having great opportunities and having so many connections now, you know, man, it's with the stuff that we just all talked about. I think the resilience of how I went from Amsterdam and you know, my childhood being what it was, and then being able to manifest all this, you know, and build all this and make all this. I said it in a different interview a couple of days ago. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's still coming. I'm just not angry, man. Like, I think maybe 5 years ago I would have been super angry. I've just changed a lot as a person, and like the thing is, like, I feel for a lot of the fans because I think a lot of fans are very angry too. And, like I feel for them because I understand why. But, me being in this position, it's just, it's very unique. And like I said, I think maybe 5 years ago, if this were the case, I'd be livid, and of course there's moments where I get mad and I'm frustrated, but I don't know, the general vibe for me has just been like,
just another chapter in the book of life.
Yeah. And like I said, there's so many new cool opportunities. And like, this is one of the things, like, talking to you is one of the things that, I wanted to do for a very long time, because I've been very intrigued by your YouTube videos for a very long time. Honestly, I'm a day one.
Oh, wow.
guy.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so I've always wanted to kind of like sit down and pick your brain and have this conversation. I'm glad it's being recorded because I think it's a very positive conversation. It's a very good conversation, because I feel that there's a perspective being laid out right now that I think a lot of people are like understand and are hopefully taking something from. And, maybe it sparks an extra discussion between other people that need this discussion. You know what I mean? I feel like it's always like, we always kind of like, we present people with this bucket of like content and information, and hopefully people can do something with that is beneficial to them. And of course, there's going to be people that it's not going to be beneficial to, or like do not like what we have to say. But hey, man, that's okay too.
This is a buffet. You can take what you want from it.
Absolutely. It's okay to be, it's okay to be critical. It's okay to criticize. And it's okay to not agree with things.
Sure, I welcome it.
One of the things that I'm agreed.
I'm happy, and sometimes I'm wrong, and I love it when people point out something that I got wrong, and that's great. That's part of the reason why I do read comments, even though maybe I shouldn't. I don't know, but because I genuinely value what people have to say, even if they say it in a really shitty, off-putting way, they still might be right.
Yeah. I think there's always a point to be made. And it's funny because one of my trainers is Terry Taylor, who is an old school wrestler, and he has a certain way of conveying a message, and it wasn't always the best way of conveying.
Sure.
But the funny thing is, now that he kind of like also realized that, and he's in his 60s, right? So he was very set in his way. Like he was an absolute brilliant wrestler, and his mind is like insane, right? For what I do, his mind was just. Still to this day, like it really sharpened me, but just his conveying of the message was sometimes very sharp, where you're like, all right, don't take this personal, just kind of dissect what's being said. Okay, this is the core essence of what he's trying to tell me. All right, that's awesome. And now that he I think he kind of like understands that, and like for the past 3-4 years, him and me have had like such a good I reflect a lot of things off of him. Like I'll shoot him a lot of ideas, and then he'll give me a different perspective on it. I'm like, man, he's so right. You know what I mean? And I think feedback, no person in the world, whether that is Tiger Woods or LeBron or whatever, and I'm like obviously using two of the most successful human beings in their respectable sports on the planet, has gotten anywhere without getting criticized heavily or without like listening to feedback from other people and other players or other golfers or, I think that's a lot of time that's what makes the difference between the people who like move forward and the people who move backward or stay behind, is because this unwillingness to accept that there is different ways of doing the same thing and there is different roads leading to the same path.
You know the band Nails?
Yes, love Nails.
I remember years ago, I was working on a song and I sent it to Todd from Nails. I was like, hey, what do you think? And Todd is like biologically incapable of bullshitting, which is why I sent it to him. And he was like, honestly, man, I think this is terrible. Nothing about this is good. Like, this is absolutely awful. I think you should just like start over. Sorry. And I was like, no, don't be sorry. Like, that's why I didn't ask you so you would validate me and tell me it was great. I don't agree with him, but I appreciate that he was honest with me. And it didn't make me mad at all. Like I was happy that he was honest with me.
Yeah, it's a lost trade. It's actually kind of funny because I especially in the beginning, I got in trouble like a little bit because I was a little too honest with certain people.
Not everyone can handle it. That's for sure.
No, the analogy was used that I was throwing hot sauce on people when I should just kind of ease them into the conversation.
I was like, done the same.
well, I'm Dutch. Like Dutch people are very sober-minded, they're very straightforward, and
Right.
that's not always appreciated by everyone. And I get that because it can be very raw. You know what I mean? But you know, it is what it is, and I find that there is like now I've understood the balance between, all right, this is brutally honest to the point where it's just not really funny, and this is the right way to go about things and kind of put them together. And this is like how I can convey my my message without sounding like I'm saying something that is not pleasant.
Harsh, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you about Blxckmass, your apparel brand. What? How would you describe that to anybody listening that may not be familiar with it?
So Blxckmass is everything that I thought was cool in my childhood that I took with me from my childhood and I still like now. It is street style skateboarding, black metal, hardcore, alternative music, tattooing, the occult, all blend in one. And it's, you know, it's a, sorry, my cats are trying to fight each other. It is a,
no heel hooks.
Yeah, well, 1 second. I gotta separate. 1 second. Come here. Come here. Stop fighting. There we go. This is actually not the aggressor. This is the defender.
Oh, that's what he wants you to think.
Oh, the big ginger one. That's the aggressor. But yeah, you know, and it's all these things that, like, you know, I dug as a kid and still dig to this day, or like find fascinating or interesting, and specifically like tattooing and tattoo culture is something that I'm very like intrigued by. The occult still, you know, that also comes back in the things that I portray on television. 1 second. Are they going at it again? Okay, good. She's safely hidden under my desk now.
There we go.
Sorry for the intrusion. You know, and I do this with 3 of my best friends, which is Daz, Pablo, and my former tag partner, Michael Dante, or just Dante. And, you know, they share the same vision. And what I really, really love about it is that it is another creative outlet for me where we can, you know, I can, because I'm not a designer. I have no idea how to design. You know, I wish I would have taken the time when I was younger to learn how to do it. But I've got brilliant people around me. You know, I've got another kid called Eric from Hungary who does like really cool style designs, and he makes the more like humanoid, kind of like people looking designs that you see on Blxckmass. And I work with a guy, Scarborough Tattoo. You can find him on IG too. You know, I work with a bunch of really talented people that have a far better creative mind than I have, but I need them so that I can project my own creativity on a shirt, a hoodie, a hat, and in the process, like sell some fun clothes. And I think one of the things that I pride myself on is that we're not really super expensive, but we do offer really good quality stuff. You know, we started with Blackcraft Called. Bobby Shabinsky is like a really good friend of mine. He's one of my business partners still.
Okay.
You know, they're rocking Space Zebra right now. They're doing awesome. Their Twitch is doing awesome. I still have a lot of love for Blackcraft because the entire team over there has always been super supportive. Man, it's something that started with Bobby messaging me and just saying like, hey man, do you want to like make a shirt? I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool. Like a little collaboration for Blackcraft. That's how it started. To then eventually, like, I set up a business and I called my business Blxckmass LLC. And, you know, we did 1 shirt, then we did 2 shirts, then we did 3 shirts, and it became like really popular. And Bobby was like, what do you think about just kind of like naming it all Blxckmass under Blackcraft Called? I'm like, fuck yeah. And then all of a sudden we had our own website and we did this and we got our own distribution going. And I don't know, it's one of those things that in 3-4 years went from like, oh, this is fun to do, to like, I've actually employed 3 of my best friends. And, you know, it's not like it's like making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we're doing okay. And that's all I've ever wanted to do, you know, for it to do okay, especially for my friends. So, you know, that there is like some extra money in there in it for them. And, you know, they're able to get their creativity out, and because everything is always an open discussion. You know what I mean? If Daz, one of the designers, is like, Tom, I've got this really cool idea for like a hoodie or a jacket, I'm like, all right, put it together and let me know. Let's vote on it. Because I might not always be right. I don't want to be one of those guys that is like completely stifled in his vision and is like, no, this is what we're doing. And if we're, you know, sometimes it's good to go out the box and just kind of like come out with something that is still in our wheelhouse, but seems a bit, you know, it stands out. And I really love that I can do that. And one of the things that, like, one of the things I got to do is I got to work with Integrity. We're currently, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, we're working with Cult Leader right now. I'm actually wearing one of their shirts. I love Cult Leader. We're doing some stuff with them, and we've got some other bands that we're talking to. I'm working with Paul Booth.
Oh, wow.
I'm working with Blackville Tattoo and doing some stuff. There's just so many cool things that it allows me to do, and it really makes me happy. You know what I mean? Like, genuinely, as a human being, it makes me happy, and that is something that I find extremely valuable.
What have you learned about the apparel business that you didn't know 3 or 4 years ago?
I think the general process as to how stuff is being put on paper to being put on a tee, and that concept being, forked over to then, materialize on a shirt, and it sounds very simplistic, but I had no idea how this stuff went. Like, I think it allowed me to have a better sense of business, because it also teaches you what sells and what doesn't sell, but also how can you make something that doesn't sell very well, how can you turn it into something that does sell very well?
Yeah.
Where, like, for instance, like we brought out a hat and it didn't really do much, but then all of a sudden I put it on a specific person and I put a picture up, and I had, like, all of a sudden there were 60 units sold, and I was like, okay, what's the difference maker here? Huh. And is it this person? Is it the way we shot the picture? Is it the colors of the picture? Is it something aesthetically that's pleasing to more people? So it really allows me to dive deep into.
Did you ever feel like you got a good answer to that? Because my experience is that sometimes you just have no fucking idea. There's stuff that you think is going to sell well that doesn't, and vice versa, and you try to learn from it, but it's really fucking hard to know.
Well, so for instance, right, we bring out this workout hoodie without sleeves. It's this giant blast reaper that we have, and that thing, we can't keep it in stores. Every single time we bring it out, within a day, it's gone.
Which is kind of surprising to me, because that's sort of an unusual silhouette, like a sleeveless hoodie. I wouldn't expect that to sell super well. Yeah,
no, exactly. But I wanted to try it. And then when we did it, I have two very, very talented photographers, like Ferrero Photography. You can find him, and Ryan Loco. I think you might know Ryan Loco. I don't know him
personally, but I know who he is. Yeah, he's been around MMA and stuff forever.
Yes, correct. And I love these dudes, and they do great business for me, because their vision. Again, another thing where I have it here, but I need someone to, like. I need someone to guide what I have in my head. And both Ryan and Daniel Ferrero, they do such a phenomenal job in presenting that. Like, I love working with creative people, and that's also why I love this. But, that hoodie, I don't get it. Like, it's a comfortable hoodie. I wear it too when I work, because that's the other thing. I would never bring anything out that I wouldn't wear myself. I would never present something to the world where I was like, well, I'm just presenting that to make money. Yeah. I can't do that. So, I wear my own stuff, because I feel like a cop out if I do that. Like, why, we're actually creating these, like, really weird pool shorts, and I'm pretty sure that someone's going to say, you're not going to wear those. I'm going to take pictures in them. Damn right, I'm going to take pictures in them.
Hey, I'm European. We're all about wearing weird short shorts.
Yeah, exactly. It's short shorts, exactly. I want to tan my legs, man. Come on. But for some reason, that design and that cut and that product, it just rocks off the, like, I don't know why. And we just ordered a bunch more. Like, we had it in stock for the first time we did it. Within a day, it was gone. Second time we did it, a day and a half, it was gone. Then we had a small extra batch that I kept back just in case. Yeah. Because I didn't think we were going to sell out. So I put the small batch back on. In like half a day, gone. And I'm like, what is it about? And even like my designer Daz is like, what is it about this design that people find so aesthetically? But at the same time, I'm not questioning. I think it's a cool design. But there's stuff that we have in the store that sometimes are much more me than other designs that I would expect to do well, but then they don't.
Yep. And it just kind of makes you wonder. It's like, man, I've been doing this for a few years now. Like, I still have no clue what's going to sell. Do I know anything?
No. And it's also like, I feel like, we have a specific style, but we have a style that's made out of multiple styles.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just one singular thing that we're doing. And I draw, like I said, I draw inspiration from a lot of that stuff that I said, but even that stuff a lot of times changes. Like, one of the things that I saw recently that I really wanted to try is like different color tees. I've never done anything other than black and white or white and black, or like, on occasion we'll do like a black shirt with a red design. But then we started like my buddy Pablo was like, hey, why don't we try a lilac shirt? And I was like, oh, okay, give me this design and put it on green, pink, lilac, blue, baby, and we put them all on the page, and I could not have gotten more different answers.
Huh.
You know what I mean? But people were stoked on them, just the fact that there were multiple colors, and I'm like, and I'm looking at because I always try to look at what's a trend right now, because I have to balance this is what I like, but I also know that this is what people like to wear right now, and then put them together, right?
Yeah.
And I look at a lot of these. Actually, I've looked at a lot of the kids that you present in your bands, like guys like Youngblood and stuff like that, and like how do they dress? And like, it's funny that you say they look like mallcore emo kids from like the early mid 2000s, and how would I present that? How would I make myself marketable to them without compromising who we are and what we do? But I still want them to look at us and go, oh, that's cool to wear. But then I also see a lot of these kids, that wear the big red baggy pants with the chains, and they wear a Cannibal Corpse shirt. And I'm like, man, that's how I used to look when I was 15. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's so funny. Like, this truly is an age of individualism and like being able to be DIY. I don't think there's a bigger DIY culture now, because people can use, you're doing it. You got YouTube, you got Patreon, you got like your own merch. And I absolutely love that.
And it's all from my shitty little IKEA desk in my living room. There's nothing.
Isn't it the best though?
Yeah.
But it's the same with what I do. I created all that by myself, and it got me huge opportunities. Maybe that's why I'm not mad. Maybe that's why, because I was able to create it myself and got so far with it, right?
Well, you did it. You did it, once, you can do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it more than once. You can do it again.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just cool to see so many of these kids, and whether or not people like, hate, or think their music is whatever they do, I just love seeing it. I love seeing people succeed. I love seeing these kids that are struggling, and that they've got this really hyperbole, like creative mind, and they make something, and it works, and it succeeds, and it's their generation and gets it. And you see these 16, 17-year-old little rappers, and like it's awesome.
That's what's inspiring to me. Even if I don't like what they're doing, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be for me. I'm just inspired by, especially kids that young, just putting all this creative energy. Yeah, it's fucking awesome to see. That just makes me happy every time, and I'm always going to cheer for those kids, even if it's not my personal cup of tea or not.
No, but also because I understand how they feel, because I was that struggling kid. I was that misunderstood struggling kid that came from bad places, did bad things, and I remember being 15 years old, waking up in a fucking squatter house and looking to my left, there's a dude with a fucking needle in his arm laying, and I'm like, I don't think as a 15-year-old I need to be here. You know what I mean? Surrounded by like fucking
something went wrong.
Fucking drunken people, and like people on drugs and shit, and just being consumed. And like, I've never been a drugs guy. I did have my stints with alcohol, with alcohol, bad as well. But just like, always feeling desolation, always feeling bleak desolation. And like I said, waking up as a 15-year-old kid in an environment like that, and you kind of go, this is not good for me. I should not be here. And why am I here? And then like all the list of reasons why you can't be home, because you don't feel comfortable or safe at home. And you know what I mean? And I understand that need for like, I need to be successful. I need to create something that allows me to get out of here. And then I see them succeed, and it makes me so happy, man. I'm 36, and like, for me, that was all 21, 22 years ago, but it's so good to see in that time that kids now have the tools to do all these like things. It makes me super pumped for them, because I feel for them. I get them.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good note to end it on to me. Is there any other words of wisdom or stuff you want to talk about for anybody who may be listening?
Man, don't compromise. Never compromise. You know, you're gonna get so many people in your ear growing up. You're gonna, especially once you get a little bit of fame, a little bit of success, because as someone once told me, success has many fathers, failure only has one.
Yep.
So if you're gonna go out, die on your own sword, and at least make sure that you did everything you could to be successful, to set yourself up for good things in life. Don't compromise. Deep down in your gut, you know what's right. You know yourself. Even when you're so insecure about everything that you do, you still know yourself better than the person that's trying to whisper in your ear. Trust who you are, and you're going to be fine.
You know, I think if you know in your heart that you gave 100%, you'll be okay if you fail. You know, it stings, you don't like it, but what really fucking sucks is failing and knowing that you could have done a little bit more and wondering like, man, what would have happened if I actually gave it 100%?
Yep. No, agreed. That's the big one. And I've been there a couple times.
Same
and that's
here.
that's why I was like, nah, we're not going out like that. No, I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's a good one.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing what's next for you, and hopefully talk to you soon.